So we start. Good evening, good morning to all who are present here from various parts of the world. Let me first wish you all happy International Women's Day. Shri Shailesh Haribhakti, our past president, Madam Chaya Sehgal, the past president and very own mentor for this SDG and otherwise also, Rahul Kalla, Madam Usha Rao Moneri, Hille Bang, Jorgensen, Shalini Singh, all the EC members, former presidents of Bombay Management Association, our collaborators for this event, Bajaj Electricals, all the members, non-members present here today to celebrate International Women's Day through very unique initiative of Bombay Management Association, the BMA SDG Conclave, where the theme is giving back to Mother Earth through SDG. The time when we started about thinking about the SDG Conclave, actually it did not start with SDG. It started with environment, social and corporate governance for the corporates, and we started discussing about how should we do it this year. Our mentor, Shri Shailesh Bhai, mentioned that instead of having only environment, social and corporate governance, let us focus on development goals of UNDP and talk about sustainability. We had decided that we will be doing this conclave somewhere in the month of February last week. But then as the discussion progressed, we realized that the sustainability can come through a very nurturing way of not only nature, but the woman who is taking care of not only family, but also the surrounding and environment. Two very great concepts of sustainability development and sustainable development and celebrating womanhood have come together to create this particular conclave for Bombay Management Association. You all know that last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we have been doing all the programs on digital platform. But then this has given us an opportunity to get people from all over the world and listen to them about their thinking, about their actions, and about the way they think the world will go. Today, we are very happy to have you, Madam Usha. As we discussed about this theme for the conclave, as Madam Chaya Sehgal was talking about, let us take it to the next level of SDG, all women conclave, which will again be another thought in itself in Bombay Management Association. And this thought is also complemented by having two great men with us. One, Mr. Rahul Kalla as anchor, and second, none other than Shri Shailesh Haribhakti, who is our former president, as the big mentor for this particular conclave. I am very happy to be here with all of us because we have not only corporates and the members, but there will be many students who are in their learning phase, joining and listening to all of us about how the sustainability and how the development can be balanced with the materialistic development that we all are measuring nowadays for development. My understanding about this is the students who are going to join in this conclave are going to get what will be the target for 2030, what will be the target for 2050, which is going to give them the thought process as they join the corporate world. How should they balance the development, the sustainability, well-being, and giving back to the Mother Earth? Today we are actually celebrating International Women's Day. We started with breaking the ceiling. For this year, the slogan is breaking the bias. I think by doing a lot of activities in different spheres of life, women have broken the ceiling. They have shown their mettle, but then also there are some biases which we need to address. And hence, I think this year, the slogan for International Women's Day is breaking the bias. The biases that we see in society, in our corporate world, in families needs to be addressed. And I think that can be done through a very cooperative way in which both the genders and all together can break the ceiling as well as address the bias that we have. I am very confident that these discussions that we are going to have over next 2.5 hours will be path-breaking, directing towards how the world is going towards and how the young managers, young leaders, young corporate leaders can take this ahead. We are all together, and using that togetherness only we can achieve the goals. So development goals which are given to all of us for equity and equality that needs to be achieved through collective efforts. At BMA, the same thought we are going to have for the development not only of the individuals but also in the organizations, how we can take this ahead. The discussions that we are going to have will be on different aspects that the participants in this panel discussion will be talking all over the world. And this panel, which is very international panel that we have, definitely is going to add value to our understanding about the sustainable development goals. I am happy that Bajaj Electricals Limited has joined hands with us. They are our collaborators for this, and I will request the Secretariat to play their message first. Then I will introduce our anchor for the conclave, Mr. Rahul Kalla, and then we can start the conclave as planned. So Supriya, please play the message from our collaborators, sponsors, Bajaj Electricals Limited.
Tough grinding with 1000-watt powerful mixer grinder by Bajaj, India's #1 mixing appliance brand.
Thank you. Thank you, Supriya. The theme for the conclave is Sustainable Development Goals, and it's all women's conclave. Supriya, there is no audio. Lakshmi?
Yeah, ma'am.
Just a second, ma'am. Just a second.
Yeah, ma'am. Just
Yes, ma'am. You may continue.
Yeah. So as the theme is of all women panelists for the discussion, but as mentioned earlier, we have very strong men, 2 men with us. One is Mr. Rahul Kalla, and I acknowledge the presence of our former president and mentor for this conclave, Sri Shailesh Haribhakti ji. Thank you for guiding us in this journey. And I will now introduce our anchor, Mr. Rahul Kalla. Mr. Rahul Kalla founded Laya Consulting Limited in London in the year 2001. Over 2 decades of experience in international business development, deal facilitation, and establishing distribution channels. Special focus on identifying and implementing partnership with both multinationals and medium-sized firms in frontier and emerging markets in North Africa, Middle East, near Europe, and Asia. He also works with technology companies to develop strategic options for future based on scenario planning methodologies. The St. John's Innovation Center at Cambridge University has appointed him as a senior advisor for international business development to assist them to conceptualize and develop innovative programs that have been successfully executed across frontier markets at senior governmental and ministerial levels. He holds engineering and business degrees from BITS Pilani and IIM Kolkata and is a Sloan Fellow from London Business School. He has 2 decades of experience in international business development, deal facilitation, and establishing distribution channels. His special focus on identifying and implementing partnerships with both multinationals and medium-sized firms in the frontier and the emerging markets of North Africa, Middle East, and near Europe and Asia. He also works with technology companies to develop strategic options for the futures. St. John's Innovation Center has appointed him as senior advisor. Laya Consulting has clients ranging from FTSE 10 companies to early stage technology companies. Clients have spanned companies from the UK, Turkey, India, Russia, South Africa, and Libya. We are very happy that Mr. Rahul Kalla has accepted our invitation to anchor this, and that gives us confidence that not only women, but the men behind them who make them big are all with us in this endeavor also. Thank you for being with us. And I'm sure that all of us today are going to get very encouraging discussions which will help us in focusing our personal and organizational goals for sustainable development. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kavita. First of all, happy Women's Day. And let me begin by thanking the Bombay Management Association and you, Dr. Kavita Lagate, for the invitation to anchor this international conclave on sustainable development. The subject is critical to a future as a human race, and I'll attempt to briefly introduce this topic before handing it over to esteemed panelists who are the real experts in this field. The realization that humans have the capacity to destroy whole environments is a relatively new one. In the 1930s, the physicist Robert Milken opined, there is no risk that humanity can do real harm to anything as gigantic as the Earth. Ironically, that was the same year that the engineer Thomas Midgley invented chlorofluorocarbons, the chemical that has created a hole in the ozone layer. Fast forward to 2005, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, a report by 1,360 scientists from 95 countries around the world, stated that human activity has polluted or overpolluted 2/3 of the ecological systems on which life depends, leading to Kofi Annan reacting by saying that the very basis for life on Earth is declining at an alarming rate. And it has only got worse from 2005 to 2022. What has brought us to this state of affairs? And what are we to do about it? The primary instrument of the destruction is business, as it seeks to meet our increasingly rapacious appetite for goods and services. A growing population becoming ever more affluent in enclaves in every country fuels the actions of companies. But business is also the most likely instrument of a deliverance. As a business leader asked, what is the business case for ending life on Earth? Several leaders, many of them women, are proving that there is no business case for ending life, but there's a very good business case for behaving in ways that not only generate profit, but also protect people and protect the planet. This formulation, in John Elkington's words, is the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line is increasingly morphing into the integrated bottom line. To the realization that to deal with a world beset with peak oil, peak commodities. Today, for example, nickel trading was stopped in the London Metals Exchange when it hit $100,000 a contract. And climate change, loss of species, and rampant inequality, companies and countries need to set themselves sustainable development goals, which will ensure that people have healthy, meaningful lives. And meeting that goal will be challenging as we wean away from a life of greed to a life of fulfillment. While no company or country denies that sustainable development goals are necessary, can we be sure that they're walking the talk? How quickly are governments willing to work around sustainable development goals when faced with the next geopolitical or electoral emergency? The world faces a growing paradox in the campaign to contain climate change. The harder it pushes the transition to a greener economy, the more expensive the campaign becomes, and the less likely it is to achieve the aim of limiting the worst effects of global warming. New government-directed spending is driving up demand for materials needed to build a cleaner economy. At the same time, tightening regulation is limiting supply by discouraging investment in mines, smelters, or any source that belches carbon. The unintended result of all this is greenflation. Rising prices for metals and minerals such as copper, aluminum, lithium, nickel, that are essential to solar and wind power, electric cars, and other renewable technologies. 3 months ago, Larry Fink, head of BlackRock, warned about the danger of rising prices linked to climate change. If a solution is entirely just to get a green world, we are going to have much higher inflation because we do not have the technology to do all this yet, he said. Are we going to be willing to accept more inflation if inflation is to accelerate a green footprint? This question is becoming critically important. This month, the UK, where I'm located, is reeling from the political fallout of a surge in natural gas prices that is partly sparked by policy shifts to combat climate change because of falling fossil fuel energy supplies, but also by unexpected weather shifts. Wind levels have fallen, cutting supplies of energy from turbines. As a wise guy said, sometimes the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. Texas and California have experienced a similar squeeze due to a nasty combination of weather shocks and reforms to mitigate climate change. Meanwhile, a new surge in demand for sustainable products has collided with COVID-19 supply chain disruptions, pushing up prices for green goods in sectors ranging from pea protein used in non-meat foods to the commodities required for batteries in electric vehicles. Welcome to the world of greenflation. How should policymakers respond? 3 key steps are needed. First, we should all recognize that the role of the state in fighting climate change is subtly shifting. A decade ago, green activists warned recalcitrant governments to provide leadership for the battle to stop global warming. This is still needed, since it will be impossible to stop climate change without public policy shifts. Governments must introduce policies such as carbon pricing. But what is also notable today is the degree to which business and finance is driving climate change reforms, sometimes almost ahead of government. Western coal plants are being mothballed due to investor pressure, as much as government rules. What politicians should do now is not so much lead in this fight as follow, in the sense of recognizing that the green transition is like to be very messy and very uneven. They must step in to provide proactive solutions when market failures occur. In the UK, for example, the government should have prepared for the fact that renewable energy cannot yet plug the gaps created by declining fossil fuel generation. Similarly, surging prices for some commodities needed in green products suggest that governments need to loosen regulatory rules that impede their production. Global leaders who flocked to last November's COP26 climate conference jostle to position themselves as environmental champions, with promises of aggressive action to put the world on course for net zero carbon emissions. Amid the bullish pledges in Glasgow, however, skeptical observers voiced fears of another new term, greenwashing. Groundless environmental claims by businesses seeking to launder the image without making serious changes. Greenwashing is the new climate denial, wrote Lawrence Tubiana, Chief Executive of the European Climate Foundation and a key architect of the 2015 Paris Agreement. It is dangerous. It is, in fact, more insidious than climate denial because without accountability rules, it's harder to identify. Such warnings are now helping to accelerate action by global companies and regulators to deliver wider and more consistent standards of climate-related disclosure. One eye-catching moment came during the Glasgow summit when the announcement of the announcement of the International Sustainability Standards Board, a new body that will establish a single framework for regulators around the world can use to set rules on sustainability disclosures. People forget that we didn't always have financial accounting standards. Those standards give companies and investors a common language for talking about financial performance, which is now so standardized that we take it for granted. What the International Sustainable Standards Board, ISSB, formed in 2021, is trying to do is to develop a similar common language for measuring sustainability performance. We clearly have a lot of work ahead, work which needs global cooperation. Unfortunately, neither a Mother Earth nor the environment recognizes political or national ecosystems. We know this, and therefore only full appreciation of it will make a collaborative journey to accomplish sustainable development goals will become purposeful and fulfilling. I now invite Chaya Sehgal, former president of BMA and founder and CEO of The Winning Edge, who's a panel moderator for the evening. Chaya Sehgal is the alumnus of Mumbai University Institute of Chemical Technology and Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. Her stellar corporate career was followed by her entrepreneurial calling to set up The Winning Edge, a venture committed to consult and support the boards in nurturing and promoting stakeholders' interest, corporate governance, and accountability. A first-generation entrepreneur, she's a passionate leader and a committed educator. She consults the board of directors of Kempro Pharma Private Limited, a vertical of the Kempro group of companies, which is a government-recognized export house. Her vast experience enables her role as chief mentor and coach for international business development. She's also a visiting faculty at alma mater, Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. Over to you, Chaya.
Well, we are very much in time. So a very good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, and my warm compliments on this International Women's Day to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Kavita Lagate, to share the theme of this BMA conclave on sustainable goals. And thank you, Rahul, for setting the stage for further deliberations with a hard-hitting account of the challenges and opportunities ahead, forcing us all to do some deep soul-searching as we embark upon exploring the journey of sustainable development goals in our quest to give back to Mother Earth. If I were to present in a nutshell the impact of progress detailed by Rahul in his introduction, I would narrate an analogy between the timeline of a calendar year with the history of our planet in the last 2 million years. So if we condense the last 2 million years in 1 year, that is, if we presume that the past 2 million years were equivalent to 12 months of a calendar, then on January 1st, when this calendar year began, humans were still in a stone age and hunting for the living. Come November 19, when the calendar year has finished almost 11 months, that is 323 days, and we are just 42 days away from the year end, the humans discover fire. After 40 days, on December 29th, just 2 days before the year ends, agriculture and cities emerge, and humans learn to collaborate with each other. Finally, on December 31st, the last day of this year, at 1 a.m., idea of science and R&D emerges to put investigative knowledge to human use. And on December 31st, the same day, after about 10 hours at 11:05 a.m., industrial revolution happens and progress begins. You see, in the last 13 hours of this calendar year, human exceptional progress, but it was all at the cost of environment. It's almost all. We are now at the beginning of the failure of all that we accomplished in the name of success in the last 100 years. And if we continue at this rate, then in the year 2050, everything will be over with just a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in the temperature, which is just as far away as 1994 was. An era of profound, unpredictable changes has already begun with pandemics, ice storms, wildfires, landslides, floods, volcano eruptions, tsunamis, hurricanes, an endless list of unseen and unheard of events until just a few years ago. The attempts of our Mother Earth to redeem itself are accelerating with each day, and it is only wise to pay heed to these. The planet does not need us to save itself. It was there before us and shall remain after us. We need to mend our ways for our survival, as this is the only home we have. The vision behind hosting this conclave on sustainable development goals is to listen to experienced global experts who have graciously carved out time from their super busy schedule, deliberate over the creative ideas exchanged by them, learn from the success stories and vision they showcase before us, and share them forward while integrating it all in our work and lifestyle to lead the much needed change to repair the damage to our environment, as we must live in sync with it for our own survival. As Swami Vivekananda quoted, wisdom lies not in accumulating knowledge, but in applying it to human good. At BMA, the thought leader, we have curated this ensemble panel, wherein each member is an expert in her exclusive facet of this progressive and futuristic vision. So without any further ado, let me now invite our expert panelists to address us. Dear all, I'm honored to introduce our first panelist of the day, Ms. Usha Rao Monari. Usha Rao Monari is Under Secretary General and Associate Administrator of UNDP, and she took charge of this position on 6 April 2021. Ms. Rao Monari has over 30 years of investment experience and has held several senior positions, particularly in the infrastructure area. She previously served as Senior Advisor to Blackstone's Infrastructure Group, as Chief Executive Officer of Global Water Development Partners, a Blackstone portfolio company, and held several senior positions, notably as Director of the Sustainable Business Advisory Group at the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group. She has until recently served on the boards of a number of organizations in the field of sustainable development and has held a number of board and advisory positions in the areas of water, natural capital, biodiversity, and environment. Ms. Rao Monari holds a master's degree in International Affairs and Finance from School of International and Public Affairs, School of Business, Columbia University, New York, a master's degree in Management Studies from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, Mumbai, India, and a BA Honors Economics from Delhi University, New Delhi. She believes developing and emerging economies account for 2/3 of the world's population, but only 1/5 of investment in clean energy. This is neither just nor acceptable. The global energy transition is an immense opportunity for developing countries to unlock economic opportunities and enable the achievement of the sustainable development goals for the world's poorest while mitigating the effects of the climate crisis. International financing flows can and must help developing economies to seize this opportunity. Reminds me of Greta Thunberg's demand at COP26, where she insisted that the $100 billion promised to the most vulnerable countries must be delivered. with additional funds for climate disaster and signed off stating fierce hope. Usha, we are all ears. Over to you. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very, very much, Chaya, for that introduction, which was not only welcoming, but very informative. Thank you very much. Dr. Lagate, Dr. Kala, members of BMA, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you very much to BMA for inviting me to speak to you on this very special day and on this very important topic. And before I start, happy Women's Day to everyone here and in the audience. The Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, as was absolutely mentioned by Dr. Kala, are in fact a roadmap towards a green, resilient, and inclusive future, if we get them right. UNDP and the UN system, for example, follows the Agenda 2030, which provides the system to provide solutions to the countries that they partner with and they work with in creating pathways towards the achievement of sustainable development goals. But if you take a step back for just one moment, we also see that it is not that easy. There are still obstacles and there are still long pathways to get to the achievement of all the goals. One of the impediments, but not impediment, one of the challenges to achieve SDGs is in fact climate change. Both of you mentioned climate change and the effect of climate change on achieving sustainability and green growth. Climate change, if you look at it, has had devastating effects both on people and the planet, especially and unfortunately on the livelihoods of the most vulnerable people on the planet. The recent IPCC report published last week yet again underscores a bleak road ahead if we don't take rapid action to mitigate emissions, adapt our communities, and protect our biodiversity. The report shows that around 40% of humanity live in areas that are highly vulnerable to climate change already today in 2022. The climate crisis is driven by a number of factors, but one of the main factors is how we produce and consume energy. According to the World Resources Institute, energy consumption is by far the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for 3/4 of such emissions globally. And this crisis, this climate crisis, hits the poorest people the hardest. And the IPCC report shows that the significant increase in extreme weather events is unfairly impacting the most vulnerable parts of the world. In order to achieve some success, we have to drastically step up efforts to help communities and countries adapt to the current impacts of climate change. This has to be a whole of society approach that brings together governments, private sector, and communities to work together in finding technology and finance solutions to combat climate change and achieve the SDGs. UNDP is supporting developing countries to transform their energy systems in a way that advances not only their climate plans, but unlocks green and inclusive growth that benefits everyone in society. We focus on supporting governments to design and implement the policies, regulations, and market mechanisms that will attract the large-scale clean energy investments needed to advance sustainable development, resilient development. At COP26 in Glasgow, many countries, especially the smaller ones, stepped up significantly to raise their climate ambition while committing to bold, wide-ranging climate action. It was really something to see. I was there and I was amazed at the level of that ambition. But COP26 also saw an unprecedented participation of non-traditional actors or the private sector, for example, in the COP and in expressing their intention to join the fight against climate change and in joining the fight to achieve the SDGs. India announced targets to increase reliance on renewables and reduce the carbon intensity of its economy, including to adopt a net zero target by 2070. UNDP in India is supporting the translation of these national ambitions to action plans at subnational levels by assisting in the development of state action plans on climate change and strengthening capacities for their effective implementation. This is to be applauded, as it is to be applauded in a number of other countries that are taking similar measures. But it is reality that the world is still far short of where it needs to be to stem the impacts of climate change on the people on the planet, and on biodiversity. We need to rapidly accelerate the transition towards a low carbon future that simultaneously supports access to clean energy for all. Because one thing we cannot decouple is the need for energy for life, for development, for business, for industry, with the fact that it has to really be a low carbon pathway in order to achieve resilient and sustainable growth. Clean energy is at the heart of the solution to the climate challenge. Evidence shows that energy can be a vital multiplier for all of the sustainable development goals, including health, education, gender equality, and economic prosperity. However, today, when you look at the picture, it's still quite shocking. 760 million people still lack access to electricity in the world, and 2.6 billion live without clean cooking options, disproportionately hurting women and girls. There's a need for a just energy transition that enables access to clean energy for all, and which will help tackle the climate crisis and end energy poverty, which will reduce inequalities, but unlock economic opportunities and empower people across the world. We at UNDP support countries to achieve this transition to a green economy. In India, for example, we've supported vulnerable communities in remote rural locations with access to clean energy towards improving their lives and livelihoods. We have worked in the health and educational services area through solar energy. We empower women with new livelihood opportunities such as electric vehicles, food processing, etc. And we're also currently in discussions with the government to develop reskilling initiatives for coal mining dependent communities. All of these are aimed at moving the economy from the path that it's on to a newer path that's greener, that's more resilient. One initiative that we started a few years ago, which we're very proud of, is called Climate Promise. Climate Promise is the mechanism through which we have assisted 120 countries around the world to make their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, more ambitious, more inclusive, and more ready, if you will, for implementation. To date, 94 of these countries have submitted their updated NDCs to the UNFCCC. We are now actually focusing on the next wave of support to implementing these pledges, because once the pledges have been made and have been enhanced, then we're working with countries and actually implementing them, creating the action plans to achieve some of what they have said that they want to achieve. We've brought together over 35 partners and have identified investment potential within the private sector for delivering NDC sectoral targets for the energy sector, agriculture sector, and water sector. One of the things we've seen through this work is that many countries are demonstrating leadership, significantly raising climate ambition, despite terrible events, recent events such as the pandemic and its disproportionate vulnerability to climate impacts. Looking towards COP27 and beyond, significant progress on NDC implementation must be demonstrated to continue this momentum and provide signals of hope. We're also, and interestingly, supporting more than 70 countries to develop integrated national financing frameworks. Why is this so important? Because once a country puts out its NDC, puts out its climate ambition, one of the areas that has to be looked at and has to be grown is that of financing the ambition, of financing the initiatives within the NDC. So the INFFs, as we call it for short, help to mobilize and align all sources of finance with their COVID-19 and SDG recovery plans and revise medium-term development plans in support of simultaneously delivering on their SDG and climate goals. NDCs, in effect, provide a roadmap not only for climate action, but also for key drivers of sustainable development, from energy to agriculture to transportation, ultimately leading to green job creation. We have a sustainable energy hub, which represents the organization's systematic and programmatic approach to respond to the energy and climate change agenda. The hub builds on decades of work, advancing sustainable energy access in the world, mobilizes partners and harnesses experience, expertise, and innovation to help 500 million additional people gain access to clean energy by 2025. This is a bold goal, but we are fully and completely behind it. where we prioritize countries and regions with the highest levels of energy poverty. Energy poverty is an issue that still remains in 2022. And when we look at that, we feel something has to be done to move away from that reality. The first objective of the Energy Hub is first to increase energy access for those who are further behind. And by speeding up investment in distributed renewable energy solutions, for example, we aim to increase access to clean and affordable energy. We also work to accelerate the transition to clean and affordable energy through systemic changes that support inclusive green economies, particularly in countries with low levels of renewable energy generation or poor energy efficiency improvement rates. We will seek, and we do seek to work and make sure that such transitions are fair. Their impact on the vulnerable communities is understood and mitigated without losing sight of the energy. And herein lies one of the challenges. How do you make sure the transition towards clean energy is just, is fair, equitable, and inclusive? Key focus areas in such a transition are equity, inclusiveness, and justice, and an equitable sharing of costs. Before closing my remarks, I want to take the opportunity of International Women's Day today to talk about the many ways in which just energy transition empowers women. It's not just about negative impacts on women and people and the planet. It is about the opportunity that green pathways create for them. We've already mentioned that the lack of access to energy solutions is a crisis that primarily affects women and children and other vulnerable parts of society. Beyond this, access to clean energy, however, can empower women by opening up new economic opportunities. Some examples of what we've achieved in India, for example, are in the state of Jharkhand in India. In the village of Kunti, women entrepreneurs produce face masks and sanitary pads thanks to solar-powered electric sewing machines, enabling women to earn an income while providing women in rural areas with much-needed hygiene products. In the village of Mandi also, we've partnered with a women's farmers organization to install solar-powered refrigeration. The women can now store excess production to sell at nearby markets, as well as seeds for the coming sowing season, providing income as well as a safety net for women who now know they can rely on these seeds in the future. These are just small but important examples to show that climate and the achievement of SDGs is not just a challenge, it is an opportunity. Indeed, it is the future that we all have to strive for as we go forward. I want to look and conclude my remarks by looking towards the end of the year, the COP27 in Egypt. Here we hope, and our hope is that decisive action on climate change will be taken because the window is closing fast. And we all know that, and I don't want to cite the rather sad statistics of where the world is in terms of emissions and warming and so on, but we know the reality. The window's closing fast, but I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that we will take action. And we will take action from a whole of society approach. It's not just governments who are going to have to struggle with this. It seems to me that private sector, civil society, everybody's leaning in to make sure that there are solutions on the table. Climate change is the crisis that defines our era. The pandemic is another crisis that has defined our era, and every country is exposed to the devastating effects of events such as these. And the answer to this crisis can only be a global one. It's not according to one country, one community, one organization. We must all work together, governments, private companies, financial institutions, local communities, to achieve a just energy transition that will power a better future for all. I thank you.
Thank you, Usha, for sharing with us the global vision of UN, all those new initiatives such as Climate Promise, INFF, and also the kind of initiatives you are taking in India for supporting the women, like the one you talked about in Jharkhand, where the solar power driven electric machines are being given to the women. We feel very happy to hear this whole thing. We feel very positive and hopeful. And I think that is the beginning for doing anything which is constructive to mitigate the crisis and to combat all the challenges which come across. Of course, we got to look at every challenge as an opportunity, which is bundled in it. So thank you so much for highlighting this. Let me now introduce to you our second panelist of the day, Ms. Shalini Singh, who is an accomplished integrated communications and sustainability professional with 25 years of multi-industry experience in sectors such as power, cement, IT, telecom, and textiles and garments. She has set up an institutionalized communication function in leading organizations of India, namely Arvind Mills, Kare Consultants, Airtel, and Tata Power. Currently, she is the head corporate communications and sustainability at Holcim India, responsible for communications and sustainability for both in its listed entities in India, Ambuja Cements, and ACC. She has earned global recognition for contributions in the areas of communications, CSR, and sustainability, and has been featured in Reputation Today's list of top 100 influencers in India in 2020. Was among the 100 top communications professionals by Reputation in 2018 and featured in Asia's top sustainability superwoman list of honor in 2019 as one of Asia's top sustainability leaders. Prior to Holcim India, she was a CXO heading strategic business unit, corporate communications, CSR and sustainability and skill development centers at Tata Power. She has also served as a CEO and MD and managing trustee of TRCDT, CEO of Skill Development Centers, and as a woman director on Tata Power's few important subsidiaries, namely TPDDL and Vadavan Solar Limited. She is a TEDx speaker and has presented Tata Power's social brands, Club Energy and Green Olution at IM8 TEDx. Shalini has built a strong digital face of Tata Power, a passionate advocate of social and green causes. She has led decarbonization and circular economy initiatives at Tata Power since 2004. She has also led business integration of 10 prioritized UN SDGs, making Tata Power a thought leader in the sustainability space. She has launched and spearheaded award-winning social brand properties to drive environment conservation, such as Club Energy and Act for Masir. She has positively impacted 3 million lives through CSR efforts and championed women empowerment through micro-enterprises initiatives and vocational training for girls. She brings diversity and sustainability issues to the fore at board level. Prior to Tata Power, she was leading marketing and communications for consulting business of Accenture India. Before Accenture, she worked with Airtel and was a part of launch team for conceptualizing, planning, and implementing Bharti's entry strategy in the Western region telecom circles. Shalini started her career with Arvind Mills, followed by Kare Consultants and IT firm. She is a member of various international and national sustainability and communication organizations. She has a master's degree in communication and extension from MS University, Baroda. She believes that sustainable development is the need of the hour. Driving sustainable business and growth is no longer a choice, but an important imperative to conserve and enhance our resources. The essence of sustainable development is to balance growth with nature and to leave this world a better place for our future generations, which is so very true when we check her profile. And Shalini, you are so nicely placed after Usha about whatever global vision that she has shared, and she has gave a couple of examples of what she did in India. Now we are going to hear a lot more of it from you during your keynote address. So you share with us your industry experience, the initiatives undertaken, challenges faced, and lessons that you might have to share with us in your journey of sustainable business development. Over to you. Shalini, you are...
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chaya. And that was a very, very long introduction. But thank you for that. And good evening, everyone. And wishing all of you a very, very happy Women's Day. I think, as Usha very rightly said, that climate change, combating climate change is one of the biggest crises that this particular decade, is facing, apart from the pandemic that we had. there is no doubt that that it's not a 1 day, 1 hour, 1 year journey, but it's a collective effort that we all at various geographies, in various countries, as various organizations have to collectively come together and do our bit to make a difference. So at the very core of the global agenda for United Nations, SDG 2030 is the principle of universality. That is, leave no one behind. And I admire that in true sense, especially being a developing country or being from a developing country. The comprehensive agenda recognizes that it is no longer sufficient just to focus on economic growth, but on fairer and more equal societies, a safer and a more prosperous planet. And I think it's very, very true for a country like India, where in many ways, the diversity of goals and aspirations across the country, looking at the, economic poverty that many of our fellow Indians face, it's very important that we balance these challenges, particularly when it comes to ESG, by institutions like ours, as we closely, pursue our development goals. Now, I must also say that most large industrial groups in India understand the importance of such a balanced approach to economic growth and sustainability. There are innumerable examples of companies strengthening rural livelihoods through their CSR activities and initiatives in the area of women empowerment, which many of us have pursued in our goals as either CSR and sustainability heads in organizations or as organizations which are serving its communities around its areas of operations. Many of these rural interventions are also focused on creating an ecosystem of sustainable agriculture that is more environment friendly. And in India's context, this particular aspect of, not just, combating climate change, but also combating the economic poverty becomes equally important. And I want to bring this at fore because we are the only one of the few countries which has 2% as a mandate to invest in the developmental goals, in India. And of course, needless to say that SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a couple of others focus largely on the CSR, goals that India very, very aggressively pursues, and so do Indian corporates. So with that background, what I also want to mention is that India offers some very unique and successful models and solutions for governance challenges too. So, for example, this is one of the few countries where 6.6 million self-help groups of women, are there with more than 70 million members. Now, you don't have this kind of model anywhere else in the world, and therefore, as we move in our journey towards sustainability, it's important to give prioritization to models that work for this diverse and yet a very integrated country that we are in. And many of you must have seen that a stellar role has been played over the last couple of years during the COVID pandemic, where thousands of women, rural women sitting in villages, have been producing face masks, N95, not just one filter, two filter masks, and community kitchens which have been put up by them, helping on the food supplies part of it, sensitizing people on the health. Therefore, you can see that as we go ahead in our journey of sustainable development, these new models in the rural space also have come up and have been very encouraging and creating an economy which for us leads the way towards sustainable development. Now, India's national development goals and its Sabke Saath and Sabka Vikas, which is the true way, or development with all and for all policy initiatives for inclusive development, are all well aligned with the global SDGs. And I think that's been a very good news, especially with the COP26 this year, where we ourselves as a country have taken a goal of achieving net zero by 2070. And therefore, we are fully on board that our development must be inclusive of all people everywhere and should be built through the participation of everyone, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized in this country. India also has made steady progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the area of health, energy, and infrastructure. And with the kind of fillip that you see, on the solar energy, as per the latest Niti Aayog SDG India Index, it shows that the strides taken by the country are in the right direction of social, economic, and environment development. I think what I personally really like is the 5 nectar elements or the Panchamrit, point agenda that our leadership in this country have talked about, and the Prime Minister has presented to the world. And I think that sort of summarizes the action that Indian corporates and India needs to take to achieve its net zero journey. And I think the number one is to get our net non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. And I think that sort of gives us a real good direction to, in our own ways, look at non-fossil fuel based, I would say, growth footprint. Meet 50% of our energy requirement till 2030 through renewable energy. Now, you have clean sources of energy, you have green sources of energy. Clean could be waste heat recovery, which many of us in cement, have. Because with renewable, you can have base load issues. And therefore, if you don't have, a real stable renewable energy, you do have an option of clean sources of energy. Also, reduce our projected carbon emission by 1 billion tons by 2030. Reduce our carbon intensity collectively as a country of its economy by 45% by 2030. And lastly, a net zero, framework of 2070, which is pretty realistic, looking at the fact that India is a developing economy. Now, when we talk about these, this backdrop, there are 4 key messages that many of us at corporate level use to handle our ESG priorities. And we believe that our ESG priorities, when handled this way, will decide what we end up delivering for our stakeholders. And the important part for many of us is to look at new technologies, innovations, or skills which define success and which help us handle ESG issues, with the same level of success that we expect while we chart out our own net zero journey. And I think Usha's pointed out how COP26 led to many companies taking up net zero targets without a net zero plan. And therefore, a caution here is, and of course, I've worked in 2 industries in my entire career of 25 years. I've worked in, for 18 years in hard to abate sectors like power and cement. So I say this with a lot of, authenticity, that we must recognize as organizations where we stand in our journey. And instead of being in a hurry to announce our net zero target, we should be committed to reducing our carbon emissions in a more scientific, in a more, committed and a very well-planned manner. And what I mean by that is that we have a framework through CDP to actually validate our targets through science-based targets, framework. We should do that. Let's not, in a hurry to announce our targets, not use frameworks where we are over-promising and under-delivering, because with the country's framework of 2070, we really don't have a choice. And plus, let's not forget that among the 4 Panchamrits, these are very, very aggressive targets where we are not committing anything beyond 2030, but we are saying that we are going to be achieving all of this by 2030. And therefore, that is a very, very important ask. Also, it is time for the business leaders at corporate to integrate ESG into their firm's DNA. For almost 2 decades that I've been driving sustainability in various organizations and watching many organizations when the mandate like triple bottom line or the mandate from SEBI was not there, it was almost like a parallel process to your strategic direction. It was a good to do thing. However, that's not an option anymore. I think most CEOs today, and also when you see the latest Harvard Business Review case that I will actually talk about, but if you look at most key difficulty that business leaders today in India specifically are facing is how do they bring in the correct ESG objectives and ensuring that it's ingrained in the culture of the company. And it's not a side talk and it's not a by the way talk. And genuinely, many, many leaders who are behind the curve are seeking those answers today. And I think the more we seek answers as corporates in this journey, whether there is a mandate or not, whether we are hard to abate sector or not, I think the closer we will be to achieving net zero goals of 2070 for the country. The third point that I want to make here is that the levers of green financing and the ESG priorities in India, or ESG investing priorities in India, create a lot of challenges as well as opportunities for us as corporates and the country. And I think many of us who are on this journey realize that the green financing itself, while in India is an area which is emerging, but actually there is no green push to the consumer to go green. And therefore we are behind the curve when it comes to regulatory push towards greener. For instance, I can only talk about my industry and power, where there is no green push or any regulatory incentive to a consumer to go green, whether to to buy a green construction material, or to for instance opt for renewable energy. And therefore there is a case to the government of India and to the to the policy makers to start looking at this aspect very, very closely, to help this country shape the right regulatory framework, which, if you see European countries and others, have in the form of carbon tax or in the form of incentives, especially in this area. And I think that is going to give a fillip to many of us, where going green will be seen as a not just good to do, but also a well incentivized scheme which pushes it. The last point that I want to make is that sustainability cannot be achieved without sustainability framework. And this is my limited experience of 18 years. We've tried this in various industries. We've tried this as a framework that we've created with WBSCD for power in the country when I was in Tata Power, or when I was working on a couple of other assignments. I think there is a need for sustainability framework for this country. And what I mean by that is that you can easily have a sustainability framework for each sector, and which is what in some manner certain companies are driving it, certain sector experts are driving it. But finally, having that framework, which is either you talk about 2030 climate targets validated by SBTi, framework that you follow, or whether there is a particular emission level at the customer end that you can calculate. I think that kind of framework is definitely a requirement for this country, because many of us who are not listed, we are listed. I mean, many of our corporate members, corporate companies which are not listed, really don't have the luxury of this kind of access to information or understanding on how to go about it, because there is no regulatory push to help them understand, or there is no push from the investors to help them understand this entire piece. Lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about what we at Wholesome India intend to do. We are aligned to our global parent Wholesome on our net zero journey, where we've announced to go net zero by 2050. We have SBTi validated targets for our journey to 2030, until 2030. And we believe that many answers after 2030 will come to us as we see new technologies like carbon capture and so on maturing in India, because India is still is still a little behind the curve on this on scalable technologies being available. But however, in our passion for sustainability, what we are pursuing is to bring in low carbon solutions to our customers, wherein we have launched low carbon concrete and cement in the country. We also have certain circular economy initiatives that we pursue with passion, which is being plastic negative and helping clean water bodies and rivers of plastic. We have green building centers across the country, which is largely led by one of our operating companies, ACC. And we have environment. What we are very, very proud of is that we have very environmental conscious operations. We are one of the few companies, Ambuja specifically, which is 8-time water positive. ACC is 1-time water positive. And we want to tell you that, this is not a journey of 1 year or 2 years, it's a journey of 3 decades. We are, and therefore we see that, there's no quick fix to combating climate change or to making a significant difference to climate change. However, plastic negative, which is another goal that we pursue under our sustainability goals, is a goal that we have been able to do much faster, especially in a country like India, where single-use plastic waste is a huge menace. And not only have we polluted our water tables, but we've also polluted our water bodies, unfortunately, really, really badly. And therefore, even there, we're bringing in technology, very interesting technology solutions to help the country weed out those plastic wastes through a technology called bubble barrier. And I don't want to throw technologies at you all, but I just want to say that we are proud of taking some of those steps which are nation building, which isn't about us. And I think more and more corporates should come and must come to make those kind of choices where we help the country go green. Another beyond the business initiative that Ambuja is very proud of is to bring in biodiesel, to do biodiesel trial in sea transportation for the first time in the country. We've shown the way to use biodiesel in sea transportation in India. We've done sea trials; they have been successful, and we hope that now much of our sea transportation will be fueled by this green fuel, which is biodiesel, going ahead. And last but not the least, our endeavor is to use less and less of natural resources and to do fuel substitution with alternative fuels. We've made a small mark there, and we intend to pursue that in a longer run at a much higher intensity, and hopefully reduce or remove, I would say, all virgin resources usage in this area. It's very ambitious, but no harm in dreaming big. So with that, thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my insights. Over to you, Chaya.
Thank you, Shalini. It was quite an inspirational corporate perspective on SDG. I mean, you talked about from operational, tactical, and strategic level, how entire roadmap has been laid down, and what are the expectations, and how the policymakers and the private sector is working together, and how you endorsed that Panchamrit strategy, which was so heartwarming that yes, here is somebody from the industry who's endorsing that, the government policy is in sync with the requirements and the expectations of the industry. That surely is the way forward. And that is where, a lot of synergy and collaboration will happen when the corporates and the government are in sync. Thank you for sharing all those initiatives which you have taken as well. I mean, I was very impressed with the plastic negative and 8 times water positive status of yours. Again, the trial of biodiesel in sea transportation, and having the green buildings, obviously with ACC and Ambuja, and that big arm of Ambuja behind. You have to make an initiative for the green buildings. So that's very, very inspiring and also reassuring. So it makes us feel really good about, the challenges that we have ahead, and we also feel confident that yes, it is a challenge, but there is a way forward and people are gearing up. This actually reminds me of Bombay floods, which happened sometimes in early 2000, which is when people discovered that the only way they could reach home without getting drowned was by making this chain of humans. That is so symbolic of how together, if all of us nations unite, the policymakers unite, the consumers unite, and the employees unite, we can surely overcome these challenges. So thank you once again. And now I have a pleasure to invite our third keynote speaker, Ms. Helle Bank-Jorgensen. She is an internationally recognized expert on sustainable business practices with a 30-year stellar record of turning environmental, social, and governance risks into innovative and profitable business opportunities. She works with many global Fortune 500 board members and executives, as well as smaller companies and investors. Helle is the founder and chief executive of Competent Boards, which offers online climate and ESG programs that draw on the experience of over 150 renowned board members, executives, and investors. Hundreds of directors and senior executives have enrolled in these programs to mitigate the risks and seize the opportunities presented by ESG and climate change. Helle also serves at NASDAQ Center for Board Excellence, Sustainability, and ESG Insight Council, World Economic Forum Expert Network for Corporate Governance, Leadership, and Emerging Multinationals, His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, A4S Accounting for Sustainability Global Expert Panel, the Non-Financial Digitization Working Group of the Impact Management Project, IMP, the Reuters Panel of Expert Judges for the Responsible Business Awards, Canadian Climate Governance Experts, a Commonwealth Climate and Law Initiatives. In 2020, she was awarded the Global Impact Award and named one of 5 people in ESG to look out for. We are looking at you, Helle. She is the author of the newly published book, Stewards of the Future, a guide for competent boards, and believes that there are many unsung heroines around the world working tirelessly towards creating a more sustainable world for us all. On March 8th, International Women's Day, and every day, let's acknowledge and celebrate those at the forefront of change. They are stewards of the future. Wonderful. So from UN policy to back to corporate India, and from here back on the global map again, this time from an accountant and a lawyer's perspective. Over to you, Helle. We are delighted to have you. Yeah, okay. Yeah. You got muted again, Helle.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think you can hear me now. I think we were having a little dance where I was trying to unmute and then you were trying to unmute me. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. It is a very important day. It's a very important year. And I just heard a fantastic word and sentence: no harm in dreaming big. Thank you very much for that. No harm in dreaming big. I was at the UN in 2015 when we agreed to the Sustainable Development Goals. I see another UNDP esteemed speaker here. That was the goal for 2030. One of the goals were this. And today it's International Women's Day. And I'm very, very pleased to be here. And I should say, I'm very, very pleased to also see Shalish here, who is not only part of the Competent Boards faculty, but also an esteemed speaker and I would say a dear friend. Shalish, thank you for all you're doing, and to everyone here. We are in a time right now where I think I will bring up another SDG, which is this one. We need peace more than ever. We also need justice. We also need strong institutions. But I have to say that I also think we need strong businesses. So again, I was very happy to hear that speech. We need what I call stewards of the future. We need board of directors. We need executives. We need investors. We need you and me, all of us, to step up and say, what is the world that we want to live in? And I think that at the moment, more than ever, we are seeing businesses, we're seeing leaders step up and actually start a journey. Do I believe that we are going to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, which are actually the voices of so many by 2030? Please say yes. Please convince me. But I'm afraid that we are stepping back. We just had the Secretary General not that long ago saying that we're actually also going back on another one of these SDGs, this one, on climate change. I'm not sure if you can see them when I'm holding them up. I actually have a presentation, but maybe we can show that later. And I think that is one of the very important part. We just had the new president of COP27 also discussing how do we link what's happening in the world with climate change. And there's no doubt that after climate change, we also have biodiversity. We also have a mental health pandemic at the moment. There's no lack of big problems. As I'm normally saying, the 17 biggest pain points in the world. But the 17 biggest pain points in the world, also the 17 biggest goals, the 17 biggest opportunities. And I think right now is the time where we need to step up and really look at these 17 goals. We really need to say, how does that link to everything else? Not seeing it as a silo, but seeing it as part of the bigger picture. That's when I'm educating board of directors, I'm educating executives, investors, Shali's helping me, all over the world to be what, I'm saying stewards of the future. It's the ESG competent boards designation and certificate program. We also have one on climate. And what I'm seeing is that leaders that are going through the programs coming back to me and saying, this is giving me not only the insight and the foresight, this is actually giving me the confidence to go into the boardrooms, to go into the C-suites, to go out and having those conversations with investors, with consumers, with others, with employees that are asking, what are you doing in these areas? And I think that's where we need to go. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to hold others accountable. We all talk about greenwash. The good Mervyn King from South Africa said, well, we have greenwashing and then we have green wishing. All of us that wish we are going to do all of these things. And I'm saying, yes, but we need green walking. I have to admit that at the moment, I'm a little bit afraid that we are not only seeing greenwashing or SDG washing, Sustainable Development Goals washing, as some are saying, but perhaps also a little bit of skills washing. I believe that the road to a sustainable future, the road to a greener future is paved by education, is paved by people that are working together, paved by partnerships. But I do see a lot of partnerships, I do see a lot of education, but I might not really see that we are fully really doing the education that we need. It's not enough to do a little tick mark and say, yep, I did that. You need to embed it, you need to reflect on the issues that's at hand. And I think that's, and Shalish, you might be able to help me here, and as well as other esteemed participants from India, saying that this is about being a wise leader. This is about wisdom. This is about integrating all of these things and making informed decisions. Informed decisions that not only good for today, but also good for tomorrow. in the book, and thank you so much for mentioning the book, I talk about the 7-generation principle, which is actually indigenous principle on the actions we take today. What impact will they have 7 generations from now? I also in the book go through all of the different areas within the broader ESG, including Sustainable Development Goals, and ask 10 questions that leadership, that the board of directors can ask themselves to reflect, what's our purpose? We're talking a lot about what's the purpose of the business. What's the purpose of the board of directors? What's the purpose of everything we do? I think we need to start asking ourselves that question and make those wise decisions. I'm looking at the clock because I didn't really see if it stopped me here if because as I said I actually did have a presentation, and I decided we'll go straight without. Maybe we can share that presentation later. One of the things I do in the presentation is also talk about the risk report from the World Economic Forum. Kind enough to say I'm part of the World Economic Forum. And there, every year, there's a risk report coming out. But one of the things I'm saying over and over again is that don't only rely on the reports you're seeing. Unfortunately, what we're seeing around the world right now is not on top of the list. Unfortunately, the pandemic was not on the top of the list. Actually, when the whole world knew that we had the pandemic. So we need to rely also on ourselves and make sure that we are taking in what we are seeing around the world, and based on that, really making informed decisions. Okay, I see the slides up now. You know what? If I can ask you simply to just run through very quickly. I think we already know about me. You don't need to have that. You can see the book. This is one of the slides I just want to show for a short second, because what I'm trying to do with all of this education is to bring those leaders that you see here, and some of them that's you're here, but others, and I'm trying to bring in leaders from all around the world to help educate other leaders, to help educate you, to help make sure that we get that insight, that foresight that we need to actually make those informed decisions. So I think I'm probably over my time. You just see that I have the Sustainable Development Goals that we talked about in terms of really how do we ensure that we can test our resilience. You can see the global risk reports, and then there's a report from Edelman that also shows us that leaders are demanding, expecting, or stakeholders, that we are being held accountable, that we are actually not only talking, but doing, acting. There's a few lines in terms of the role of the board of directors, and one of the things I'm very clear on is that we need to be prepared to sign off on these issues. It's not enough to just put out the goal and say we want to be net zero or net positive. Good Paul Pullman's and Andrew Winston's book. We need to also say, how do we get there? What is our transition plan? How do we hold ourselves accountable? And I'm trying to follow the slides here now very quickly. The search firms joint declaration. If you go to the next, sorry. One of the things I'm very happy to see is actually now that the search firms have started to say that they will assess board chairs, they will assess candidates for board positions on their climate expertise. I wanted to bring much more than that, no doubt, but at least that we have in terms of saying, what kind of climate expertise do people have? You can see what they say they're going to ask about, and I'll try to see if I can hold them accountable, and hopefully you will too. So with that, I think the last one is the upcoming program on climate designation program. So of course, if any of you are interested in that, please do let me know. And I think with that, thank you very much for doing this. It's so important to bring forward and to dream big, just to borrow from my previous esteemed speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hele. We could hear you for another 5 minutes. We do have time. Would you like to?
Sorry, I had the 10 minutes on my phone here.
You could go on for another 5 minutes if you wish to share anything more.
You know what? I think what would be good is that if there are questions and that we can do that. I mean, I would be more than happy, of course, to share more. But I think one of the things that I hear over and over again is that it's also when we have that conversation, that's where we start to reflect on different things.
All right.
All right.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much for that bird's eye view, and also the message to dream big. And I think that is the message we all need right now very badly, because we all are not really feeling so high with the environment around us. But yes, as Shalini said, that whatever was achieved, they had to work for 30 long years towards it. And no success is achieved overnight. It takes 20 long years, and in those 20 long years, we have all sorts of ups and downs. And so long as we keep dreaming big and keep facing those ups and downs on our chin, I think that's when we make it really big. So thank you so much. I think we had a wonderful set of keynote addresses. Let me just put in a few thoughts over here before we move on to the panel discussion and we start asking questions, just as Hele has asked for. And I think my inbox is full of questions anyways. So yes. So sustainability needs global cooperation and discipline, realization of a global vision for a net zero future, and a climate resilient world that people actually want to live in will have to be a collaborative one. That is one outcome of these keynote addresses. We have to have, therefore, the academics, the businesses, the civil society, the citizens, and the policymakers all collaboratively looking at the innovations and approaches which would deliver a greener, carbon neutral society with the opportunities such as potential for new jobs in greener economies, better healthcare and quality of life, and sustainable food and water supplies to continue to thrive without the concerns for their survival. So now let us move into the direction of panel discussions. And we have Usha, who has been with us since 4:30, and she has to leave at 6:30 for another meeting after 2 hours. So I'm going to direct my initial couple of questions to Usha. And I request Shalini and Hele to bear with me until such time. So Usha, here is a question to you from Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, who has visualized this conclave. He asks you, can India lead the just transition by focusing on women ownership of distributed renewable power through microgrids and fruit tree orchards? And in order to accelerate our net zero commitment to 2050, what will move the needle?
Thank you very much, Chaya, and thank you for the question. I think it's a very wise one. I mean, honestly, I could answer that question sitting here for 4 days, but let me keep my comments short and to the point. So the first part of the question was around distributed energy networks, if I understood correctly, and microgrids, and whether women could prove to be a defining factor in that. So if I take a step back, I think, as I said in my opening remarks, energy is the foundation of the economy. Energy is needed for everything. Energy is needed even to achieve the 17 SDGs that we have set for ourselves. However, there is a transition from where we are today to where we want to go. And that transition has to be just, it has to be inclusive, and it has to involve the whole of society. One of the things that is changing, in fact, in this transition is the models of energy infrastructure that have existed so far in the world. Energy infrastructure has been centralized, it has been large, it has been fossil fuel based. As we move towards a greener future, that model is changing slowly but imperceptibly. For example, it is changing towards the feedstock or the source of fuel, away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But more importantly, and to the question, it's changing into a different delivery model. Decentralized infrastructure is becoming something that the world is looking at as a way, as one of the ways to achieve the greener and more inclusive future. And will women power it? Most likely, yes. That is my conviction. And why? Because women are at the household level, for example, the providers of energy, the providers of basic services, in fact, water, etc., included, to the family. So when you have decentralized infrastructure with a focus on last mile connectivity, this is where women come into the fray to be the movers of that kind of, and users of that kind of infrastructure. So yes, to the question, will they be able to, provide the way forward? Second part of the question was around, Chai, if I'm not mistaken, what would move the needle for India or for any country, I presume, to achieve its net zero goals? Is that
rather to accelerate it,
or accelerate?
Yeah.
So that was the 4-day answer that I was going to have to give you, but I'll try to give it to you in 30 seconds. So net zero goals, as far as I'm concerned, as far as UNDP concerned, are ambitious and admirable goals that many countries and many companies even are setting for themselves. But as I think Shalini said, not everybody has a plan. No, some do, and not everybody has a plan. So you have to start with the NDCs. You have to add to the NDCs these financing frameworks that will allow you to reach those goals, and that will accelerate. But in my conviction, there's 4 things that will accelerate the transition to net zero. One is indeed finance, and we've all been talking about it. What kind of finance, different types of finance, public, private, etc. The second is innovation, both innovation in technologies, as I believe one of the previous speakers spoke about, but also innovation in itself, strategic innovation, business models, the way you actually implement what you want to implement. The third is actually governance. And by governance, I mean policies, regulatory framework, and institutions that come together with the implementers of the plan to hasten and accelerate this. Because I can tell you, sustainable development goals and climate and net zero in particular are very much at the nexus between policy, finance, and innovation. And I think if those 3 things come together, we will in fact accelerate and move the needle towards net zero. It won't be easy, and I don't think anyone expects it to be easy, but intention, in my view, has always been 70% of the game.
Thank you. Actually, that's true. No progress has ever been either easy or fast, both. The progress always takes its own time if it has to be sustainable one. I agree with you. And yes, I do note that it's the finance, the strategic innovation supported by the governance, which is going to accelerate any target. And I think Shalini did talk about it in details. So yes, I do agree with that also. Shailesh bhai, you want me to ask any more clarification around it, or I can move on with the next question? All right, so I move on with the next question now. There is one very interesting, finding which has come to us, and this has come to us from Mr. Ravi Krishnamurthy, who is the CEO of SBI Life Insurance, and he is our member. So he says that soil conservation and nourishment will create way to green the planet, cool weather, and therefore higher agriculture productivity, which in turns will also solve the food, water, and famine problems, As in literally speaking, solution of all these problems are rooted in soil. So ESGs should create safe soil as the epicenter of their policies for action, funding, sponsorship, CSR, etc. This movement has been launched by Sadhguru Jagdi Vasudev in India. And so he goes on to say, if root is supported, the rest will bloom. All our efforts on account of the weather, trees, water cleaning, etc., without addressing the soil may not literally bear the fruit. The resources should be focused, therefore, towards working on the cause to derive optimal returns rather than defraying them across on so many areas and losing efficacy of ESG investments. What do you say to that, Usha?
Well, in short, he's right. So, and he's right, not because the focus should be only on soil compared to where it is today, but it should also be on soil. And it is, he's absolutely right. When we talk about resources, we think about water, we think about land, we think about energy, we think about all these inputs into the production process. And we try to focus on them and we try to make them better, etc. One of the inputs, in fact, is soil. And soil is a, if you will, conductor of many of these resources. For example, water, when you know, in terms of irrigation and so on, soil has to be a huge foundation to achieve what we're trying to achieve. Now, I don't know what he had in mind specifically, but, you know, soil remediation and soil as a carbon storage mechanism is something that's being looked at now in the agricultural sector. And so I think clean soil, healthy soil is something that absolutely will help us achieve the agricultural goals, for example, and indeed water efficiency goals, energy efficiency goals, and so on and so forth. So I think that I agree with that context. The question becomes, what do we have to do to actually intervene in that space? One, you need new technologies. I don't think the technologies we have today, when it relates to soil remediation or, you know, carbon storage in soil, etc., is something that we know completely. I think there are emerging technologies that will help us. Two, as I said, depending on the technology, there's going to be a cost to it. So finance becomes, you know, how do you finance it? Who finances it? What is the equitable sharing of costs in terms of looking at this issue of soil between public and private actors and even farmers for that matter? And then third, really, it's, you know, is the government cooperating and collaborating with those with the technologies and with those with the finance in terms of making sure that the enabling environment allows us to look at soil as an input in addition to all the other inputs into the production process. So I think the gentleman who brought this up, I think brought up something that people think about but don't talk enough about.
Yeah, thank you. I think every time it comes down to new technology, it comes down to finance, and it comes down
inevitably
to well, right? Those three seem to be the focus points for everything. But I thought that was a point which was worthy of considering because we have been talking about everything other than soil. And so I was very keen to bring it about to your notice. There is another pointer which has come to me, and it says that as per Niti Aayog report, which I think Shalini also made a mention of, India's overall score across SDGs has improved by 6 points from 60 in 2019 to 66 in 2021. It's doing reasonably well on SDGs. However, what would one's guess be about India's GDP growth if all women between, say, 18 to 65 were gainfully employed, with at least 50% of them employed in the formal sector? So today on International Women's Day, if I could request you to share your thoughts on a couple of issues such as gender equality and employment and economic benefits around the SDG Goal 5 of gender equality, where how Australia has achieved 100% in both these parameters and what can we learn from there and how do we replicate it in India, I think it will really help.
Well, thank you, Chaya. I think that also is a very long topic. And in fact, I'm on a panel later today to talk about it. I think gender equality is vital for a greener and more inclusive future. There is no question about it. And when we look at the equality numbers today, for example, in the energy sector, just as an example, they're pretty shocking, okay? women's participation in the energy sector globally is below that of anywhere else or in any other sector, despite being what? Is it 50% or so of the labor force in general? Women only account for about 30% of the labor force in renewable energy. So when you take renewable energy as a proxy for green growth and as a proxy for achieving sustainable development goals, this is a very depressing statistic. Fewer women reach senior roles in energy than in the broader economy. Do you know that? That's also pretty shocking. In 72 countries, there's a study done by the IEA that found that women represent only 6% of the ministerial positions responsible for national energy policies and programs. These are just some questions. So if you look at gender equality exists in my mind on a few bases. One, there is, or gender equality or empowerment, if you will. One is in the political sphere. How many women do we have in positions of power and positions of influence in order to make sure that policies and implementation are gender sensitive or gender responsive, let us say, gender inclusive? Doesn't matter what word you use, it's all the same thing. Two, economically, how many women are being given the resources that perhaps men are given, both in terms of finance, in terms of mentorship, in terms of advice, especially when it comes to startups, in terms of technological support? How many women get that? So economic empowerment. Do women get paid the same in the formal sector as men do? Are they financially empowered? Are they economically empowered? And then social empowerment. How do women escape what they are now? And unfortunately, COVID really did exacerbate this. How do women escape this sort of gender violence and gender attacks that have taken place and have been exacerbated by COVID? How do they become more socially empowered? I'm proud to say, though, that in India, I think women hold a better position than in many, parts of the world. But it's not completely clear whether that's true. So I think social empowerment is also another area that I think is needed and should be focused on. So to your specific question, if women got everything you described, right, GDP growth would be quadrupled. No question in my mind at all. In fact, if you look at some of the statistics around companies, and Hele may know this better, you will see that in the S&P 500, I can't remember the exact statistic, but companies that were either run by women or had women at prominent positions in senior management and at the board level have done better than companies that don't. So with all this evidence base, I wonder why this is not happening. And certainly at UNDP, we're going to make sure that we at least play a large role in making it happen. Thanks, Chaya.
Welcome. So with a quadrupled GDP, we will also have a higher count on account of genuine progress indicators and gross national happiness if women take over a little more.
I think so.
Isn't it?
I think so.
And I think so what, this just energy transition needs a little more is some yin energy. I think if there is some more yin energy around it, the energy transition will happen just. And I think it will also build a lot more happiness and societal and environmental awareness. Because at the end of it, a home is the nucleus of every social and economic activity. And if a homemaker, therefore, is given that kind of an empowerment and given those kind of opportunities, I think we should be seeing more inclusive progress on this planet. So I do agree with you on that. And there's one last question, which is for you, that how can we rekindle hope despite the pandemic and all the other crises around us? Can massive technology push for carbon conversion to energy is possible? Can such energy hubs be created at scale?
Yes, they can, but it requires the three enablers that I mentioned. It's not going to fall out of the sky, right? Despite every good intention. Yes. And I think what I'd like to leave with you is the following, and I certainly believe in it, is that all progress of the sort you have just outlined, you've outlined it in carbon and climate and so on, but all progress has to be intentionally impactful, has to be intentionally inclusive. So when we at UNDP, or when I look at, investment or finance or any such thing, which is really a key enabler to achieve the kind of goals you're laying out. It's a 3I sort of approach, which is investment plus impact. Actually, it's 4 I's. Investment plus impact plus inclusiveness plus integrity. I think, who was it that spoke about greenwash? Hele, I think it was you, greenwashing, blue washing. There's all sorts of colors of washing these days. The fact of the matter is, in order to achieve the goals such as the ones you have just set out, Chaya, we need all the 4 I's. And if we do that, then I think we can move forward and be hopeful. If not, unfortunately, we will just be stuck at, at a place where we're talking about stuff and not implementing it. Thanks.
Thank you for those 4 I's. I think one more I would like to add from my side, and that each one of us should just simply take a pledge and say, I am responsible, so that we can make those other 4 I happen, isn't it? Ultimately, the responsibility has to be taken by us. We can't be pushing the responsibility on somebody else and expect that our dream materializes the way we wish to. So thank you so much, Usha. Now you please sit back and relax. And now I'm going to, ask my other panel members. But in the meanwhile, if something else comes, until such time that you have to leave the panel, I would still come back to you. So
thank you very much.
Yeah. So now let me come to Hele. So Hele, you have a background of law. So I would like you to recount some instances where a legal framework has effectively demonstrated behavioral changes to accelerate sustainability adoption and adopt a more sustainable existence. Just now I said that the 5th I, where I say that I take responsibility, has to get added to those 4 I's. Where the self-motivation is, I think, the most important factor in going out and achieving anything, it does help that some external motivation comes through policy, through some regulations, through some, law. So how does it help? And for example, somebody has given a very interesting example that smoking has decreased because of no smoking rules in offices and public spaces. So what is it that we could do, in your experience, you could suggest from your experience that would help us push the sustainability agenda further? You are still muted, I'm afraid.
It seems like I continue to have a dance with your good people in terms of muting and unmuting here. So I hope you can hear me now. Yes, good. So yes, and it's interesting actually bringing up in terms of smoking. Sometimes I'm saying, when people say, well, what's changed? Do you remember when we could smoke in the airplanes? Right? We could only smoke at the back of the airplane. I'm also saying in terms of I'm a business lawyer, I'm also an accountant. And when I took my exam as state authorized public accountant, which is what you call it in Denmark, one of the questions was, how much can you deduct in bribe? And people nowadays look like, what? Yes, you could deduct 10% in bribe. That was back in 97. It's not that many years ago. So just, Usha, you were talking about women and boards and executives. There are also studies out there that actually show you have lower corruption if there's women. But that was not your question. So in terms of seeing how can we leverage, there's no doubt in my mind that laws and regulations, they often come to force when companies are not doing what we all hope expecting them to do. So what we're seeing at the moment, one of the laws and regulations out of France actually, but it's now starting around the world, is to put the due diligence into the supply chain. So it's not enough to say, as we used to say back in the 90s, well, that's not my responsibility how the suppliers are doing. It's the responsibility of the suppliers. We are now seeing in terms of climate that we are starting to put, scope 1 and 2, scope 2 and scope 3, and going to the whole accounting basis. We are seeing that the voluntary frameworks for reporting, being that the Global Reporting Initiative, the SASB, the integrated reporting. I think you said I did the first integrated report in the world. That was voluntary. That was companies that said, okay, we want to do something. In terms of many of the other code of conducts, work with a lot of companies around the world, visiting their suppliers. That was before we started to have the laws and regulations. So I see often that we have businesses that are stepping up, that are saying this is not only the right thing to do, we also have innovation based of it. We also actually have the integrity. And with that comes the trust of all our stakeholders. And we have investors that are asking us to do these things. So we'll just do it. We don't need laws and regulations. Then you have the suppliers of those companies that are kind of like in the middle. They are a little bit forced to do it because the larger corporation says, if you want to be a supplier to me, this is what you need to do. So the power of procurement. Also there, we need to make sure we hold companies accountable. Hence why I think we are starting to see some of these laws and regulations. And then at the end, we have where we go, it's really not happening. So let's put some incentives in place. That could be laws and regulations, but it can also be something in between where we, put a price on carbon. I have to admit right now, I think that probably the biggest price on carbon and the biggest driver that we're seeing is the price on oil and gas right now due to the war in Ukraine. And due to in terms of Russia. And if that is going to make us all say, okay, how do we ensure that we have renewable energy? Well, that's perhaps a driver that we could not put into regulations and laws, but will drive companies, are driving companies. And I think driving us as consumers, because when you have to go and fill up your car or do something else, and just wait and see how the prices are going to rise. We are going to, I think, start embedding externalities into the price. So those externalities will be internalized into the price of our goods and services. And then back to the ISSB, which is where you have the reporting, international financial reporting standards that now have taken this in. I think we're going to see the assurance on these matters so that we hopefully all can trust businesses, not just because they are complying with the law, but because they're complying with what we, as their stakeholders, expect them to do.
So compliance with a commitment for change is what is going to make that compliance virtuous. Otherwise, it's merely just compliance for the sake of it. You want to tell us a little more about this sustainability board and sustainability standards, Hele? You are just the right person to tell us about that.
I would be happy to. And you just stop me because this is not a 4 days. This is probably 30 years in its making. So at the moment, as I said, Global Reporting Initiative, fantastic impact around the world. So many companies are reporting based on that. We then started to see the SASB, so sustainability accounting standards boards that were looking more from a financial point of view. We had the integrated reporting, so the IRC. There's a lot of alphabet soup here, so stop me if I'm saying some letters that goes like, what is this? So there we saw a merger between them. Now, during COP26, here back in Glasgow last year, I think a little bit to the world's surprise, we actually saw a merger into IFRS, which is the International Financial Reporting standards that have 140 countries, I think, around the world that are using those financial standards. So you're starting to see that the voluntary standards are being embedded into the more established standards. Let's just say that. So as an accountant, I was reading all of these IFRS and ISSB and all of the IASB, which is the International Accounting Standards. And now we're starting to see that being embedded. We will probably in a few weeks going to see the first prototype. We already had kind of like a draft back in I think December, and prior to that, or more on that. We're going to see that happening now, and they're setting up the ISSB as we speak. We have the chair, we have the second in command. So we are really going to see this come to flourish. And I think that things are not happening one day to another, but I really see a tremendous impact that this can have on how we report, how companies reporting, and as I said, how also assurance providers are starting to say, we need to ensure that this is not just greenwashing or blue washing or SDG washing, but this is actually something that's been have the same rigor in how we collect the data. And yes, I have been out there and doing assurance or verification of such reports, and I think we need also there a lot of education of people both within the companies, but also the assurance providers and all of us to understand what is it we are reporting on, and what is just, oh, I'm a little bit better than you are, but that's not good enough. So that's another development. You have here the earth and behind you, and you have a little tree. We can do all of this reporting, but at the same way as I said before, what is the purpose? And I think we need to make sure that we also state that, so we really move forward, not only on reporting, but also as we're talking about here on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, and of course, I mean, the reporting will happen, but then the management has to also understand how to execute it, because in execution, excellence lies the success of any strategy. So one thing is that the board gives guidelines on the basis of the new standards which have come. And the other thing is how they mentor the management, and how management mentors the employees. It takes care of the customer's interest, mentors the suppliers. I think it's a long drawn commitment, and it eventually boils down to, again, as I said, executional excellence, where it has to be the self-awareness and the self-motivation to make sure that we save the planet no matter what. Because otherwise this whole thing is just futile. No standards, nothing, no business reporting, nothing is going to matter if the planet itself is not there. So I think with that awareness, we have to create between them and percolate it down the line.
I think the planet will stay.
Yes, it will. It will.
I think we're what we are talking about is a biodiversity. Your three. It's our health. It's our future, right? As that's at stake here. And I think we manage what we measure. We said from but we also need to make sure that we really understand this, and there's one, and I think you said Mother Nature somewhere in the fantastic material I got from you, and there's one person that do not listen to what we're saying now, or person. Mother Nature is not listening to us right now. She's just continuing to send us invoices, right? We have been putting enough out there. And as I said in an article somewhere, it's kind of like you have your teenager that keeps like doing things that you don't like. And at some point you say enough is enough, right?
Yes.
And I think right now, we probably we are far over our planetary boundaries. And we are getting the invoices. So if we're going to embed it into prices and putting shadow prices on and starting to think about that and therefore take action that one, or are we going to wait? It's just going to be more expensive the longer we wait.
Right. Only singular focus on money is going to make money more expensive and harder to earn, actually. That's true. I agree with you. So, Hele, now I'm going to ask another question to Shalini and give you a little rest, and I'm going to revert to you a little later again. So, Shalini, tell us how the corporate mass communication can help re-engaging the world to sustainability. Can we catalyze global communication by partnering with all the organizations you're connected to? This is the question from Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti for you.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. However, I also believe that the authenticity of the communication lies in in having a good strategy and a good plan. And I think I did touch upon this when I spoke earlier, that definitely what you need today is a good communication strategy to talk about initiatives that you are doing which are replicable, for sure. But I also go to the basic point of considering that we're talking about greenwashing and blue washing, is why it is important to talk about things that you've genuinely done and things which have genuinely made a difference. And I just want to talk about a couple of initiatives that I have seen happening, and I have personally admired in biodiversity conservation of certain marine life in my lifetime. It started actually much ahead of when I was born. But the whole biodiversity conservation of a species called Mahaseer, which is responsible for a good health of marine life, and some of them which were done by Tatars and others that I've worked for, I think those are very inspiring initiatives that you can communicate. But if an initiative is still being embedded and still being tested, I don't think that's the right time. The other thing is that while it's easy to communicate, it's important to communicate the outcome of those initiatives as well. And I think many times I see organizations in a hurry to communicate without focusing on what difference they have finally made from those particular initiatives. Partnership, like Mr. Haribhakti asked, I think partnership is the way to go, because nobody can save a planet on alone, or save or make it better alone. So I think more and more of us in India have been competing, thinking that CSR and sustainability is a differentiating factor for us. But I, coming from the fact that I've been in this field for 18 years, my limited take is that this is an area where we should collaborate and cooperate and help even your own competition to join and come up to speed, and not look at competing, because you cannot eradicate poverty by working in one village or around your area of operation, or you cannot be a sustainable country in only a particular geography. So this is an area which requires huge wisdom and collaboration, especially in a country like ours, where we need solutions which are scalable. We have high population density. We are not as blessed as Europe, where many new technologies are largely successful because they cater to a smaller number of people. We are a country which requires large solutions, large scalable solutions at a particular at a very economic price. Unfortunately, we are very price sensitive as well, and things which work and which need low maintenance, because as a country we are not great at maintaining our assets as well. So when we look at ourselves, it is important to really understand yourself, so that the solutions that you allow remain there and serve you with that much, understanding and commitment. And so, yes, collaboration for sure in technology, in bringing, new initiatives, in piggy banking on low-hanging fruits of other organizations.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So actually, when you talk about this, it reminds me of so many business models in our own country. We being a poor country, I think Amul is one such a model. Because when I was reading about the history, I came across a piece of information that when Dr. Kurian went to New Zealand to learn the dairy technology, the New Zealanders looked at the data and they said that, Mr. Kurian, the amount of land which is available with one marginalized farmer in your country is less than the amount of land, we allot to one cow or, cow for grazing. So you are not going to have any kind of dairy production possible at all, because you will not be able to produce the quality product. You are going to have cows who are not going to give you milk more than, say, 5-10 liters a day. And so this dairy technology is not possible to implement. But then Dr. Kurian, he writes, I read his autobiography or something. So he says that, but I was determined that, I needed a white flood revolution because the children in my country were starving and they had no milk. So he nevertheless went ahead, he learned, he came here, and that is when he pioneered this fantastic cooperative model where every farmer is coming in the morning, depositing milk with Amul, and how technology was so beautifully used, where the fat content was determined at that very point in time and the cash was paid to the farmer. Unlike, our multinationals, or unlike our huge companies who live on suppliers' credit for a negative working capital, here was a farmer who was the supplier and who needed the money because otherwise the kitchen fires won't be burning in his house. So they had to come out with a very different model, and they did come out with a model, and Amul has not looked back since then. In fact, during pandemic, against all its competitors, it is Amul which increased its sales, by 22% or something. They even launched that Panchamrit during, Ganesha festival days, a 10 milliliter pouch, because I think in March, the pandemic began, lockdown began, and in August came that Ganesh Chaturthi. Now this Panchamrit is different from our Panchamrit strategy. But the innovation, the low cost innovation, the cooperative model, caring for the stakeholders, being honest about it, and look at their advertising campaign also. I mean, that Amul girl, she's so endearing. We are always looking at the posters, and they will never miss out on any happening, event, and they'll immediately be there on their poster. So, and they spend just 2% of their revenue on advertising as against Nestle, which spends 8%. And still nobody has been able to beat Amul butter in the morning, in the market. Everybody wants Amul butter as in Amul butter. So yes, I think another example I would say about Professor Mohammad Yunus, the way he pioneered microfinance in Bangladesh. All poor people, all poor women, but such high credibility, and he has actually gone on record to state that the poor never defaults. The credibility of the poor to return loan is highest. Ila Bhatt in India went about knocking on every door, just asking for 1 rupee because people couldn't afford anything more, and she pioneered Seva. ITC, a big conglomerate. I think the e-Chaupal model, long before the digital revolution took place in India. I think that was so fantastic. In Kalahandi in Andhra Pradesh, they used that entire area where there is famine all the time to plant eucalyptus trees, because there is nothing else that could have been planted, to fight the carbon footprints. But eucalyptus plant can grow because it has the tremendous capacity to extract water, from where there is no water also. There are so many examples. But yes, of course, there is one thing which is the commitment. There is another thing which is inclusion. There is third thing where there is integrity. Taking responsibility by the self. And then the policy comes around, and now, of course, we have this Atmanirbhar Bharat and entrepreneurship fever, where people are being favored a lot in all social entrepreneurship initiatives. So I think rural entrepreneurship, frugal innovation, social entrepreneurship. These are the solutions for developing countries. I think Usha has left, but these are the solutions probably for us, and there is a hope. And of course, we had Tatas who have been doing so much for the society when the word CSR was not even born. So they continue to be there. Now, that brings me to another question to you, Shalini, and that is about this, convergence between the CSR and ESG. See, any kind of value creation where a short-term funding is used to create the long-term advantage is the best kind of investment proposal, right?
Right.
I'm now asking you a question over here, which has come from one of the former presidents, Mr. Nitin Bhagwat. He says that how can we direct the annual expenditure mandated for CSR to build long-term results in achieving the SDG goals? Do you recall any instance where lasting value proposition was created during a CSR journey and which supported the SDG goals as well? Because that could be a major clue in very gently diverting, people and their money and their efforts towards the SDG journey, even before they could realize. And once they realize, the kind of outcomes they achieve in it, and because of that, the kind of contribution they have made to the world, I think that is what will then create the self-motivation.
Yeah.
So would you like to answer that, Shalini?
Sure. Chaya, while people talk about SDG goals at 100 feet level, but I have used this model and prioritized SDG goals for Tata Power. And among the 10 SDG goals that we prioritized for us, there were 6 of them which were CSR, another 4 which were business. Okay. To answer your question, it is absolutely the way to go. If you have goal number 1 to eradication of poverty in India, which is very relevant to any corporate as well, 2, 3, 4, 5 gender diversity. I'm just going to give you one example here, which will tell you how it is possible. No SDG goal achievement is a one-year plan. It's a roadmap that you create, and minimum, even when you work with Heli and many other experts in this area, they'll tell you that 3 years is also a very, very ambitious time frame to make a significant difference to a particular SDG. But most organizations now in India, and thankfully they're doing it well, is they have a 3 to 5 years prioritization of a SDG goal in CSR. And and they are creating programs which are outcome oriented to achieve those goals. Now I'm going to give you an example where in my previous organization, I created a micro entrepreneur model for women called Dhaga. Myself, which was not a one-year journey, it was a 4-year journey of creating, bringing in women from 18 locations to do embroidery wherever it was traditional embroidery, to do stitching, and they were supplying it. They were actually doing apron stitching for Taj. So it was commercial orders, etc. Which over a period of 4 to 5 years, the ambition was that every woman should get a monthly income of 10,000 rupees at least through Dhaga. And therefore, it is the programs that you create which map these SDGs along with outcomes are finally going to help corporates to achieve their goals. And then you ultimately, like Mr. Haribhakti is saying, ultimately you will do partnerships for Dhaga to support many other women who may not be your community, which is what we did during, when I was there last year during COVID, the first year, where we also supported women who were not from our community, but 10 kilometers ahead, but willing to do mask making, etc., and making that kind of money. So it's the programmatic, target-oriented, outcome-led approach which is required to achieve or do justice to a SDG. Anybody who thinks that I have aligned myself to an SDG and that's a great thing, then needs to relook at what they are really doing in this area. And same goes with CSR. And same goes with peace, which she showed, because I think that is the most ignored SDG. Of course, we are all lucky to be living in a world where there was hardly any war. But I think the last few weeks have made the importance of SDG 16 that much more important and relevant. So each of these SDGs, and what are we doing in our sphere of influence to ensure that we do justice to that SDG either as a corporate or as a country, and that is the approach that needs to follow. So why would CSR be behind the curve? In India, it's like I said in my keynote as well. In India, you cannot ignore economic, poverty, or the fact that we have 60% people below poverty line and drive the growth agenda. It doesn't work like this at all. To create a more inclusive sector, we as corporates who have the license to operate in this country will have to do both hand in hand simultaneously, and perhaps do more meaningful, sustainable livelihood led CSR, for making sure that nobody is left behind.
Actually, there is no business case to ignore the poor at all. I mean, if you talk about Mr. C.K. Prahlad's book, Bottom of the Pyramid, okay, I recall one beautiful case with the Tata Tea in Munnar, where, during those olden days when everybody was trying to get out of the tea business, okay, the Tatas came out with a very innovative employee buyout model, as against the opportunity to sell it off to some kind of a construction fellow at a discounted price of the land. Because they knew that the moment it is sold for construction, the entire ecology of the land will be destroyed. It will be erased, and he's going to simply erect their hotels and lodges for tourism. And then they realized that there is nothing that could be done with these workers over here who have done nothing in their lifetime other than just plucking the tea. So they went out for this employee buyout model, where they got ICICI to create a loan of 24 crores where they stood guarantor. Every share was priced at just meager 10 rupees. And the highest money ever that was invested by a worker was 3,240 rupees. And that was given by the ICICI loan. And Tata's managed to get the moratorium on it. And the very next year, the productivity, quadrupled. And there was a simple reason, of course, that, from the profit and loss account, the payroll costs disappeared. And now these people being the owners, they had to really work hard to get dividend, because otherwise they had nothing to earn. And there was, of course, a sense of ownership that, now this place is ours and we have to make it work. And Tata's retained some 19 to 24% equity, which was used for management and strategizing, which the poor workers did not understand. So Tata's did not leave them. They handheld them right through. They arranged the loan for them. Today, the loan is repaid. And Tata's went on to become Tata Global Beverages, That's again a UN recognized model, okay?
Yeah. But Chaya, I have a point to make, and maybe many of you who are leaders in CSR may not agree with me. I am, in that sense, an outsider. I'm more of a sustainability professional. But I'm a little hard on CSR guys in this country, because I believe that the journey from that philanthropy and feeling good in the boards, also created a certain level of entitlement in our communities, you see. And it's only for the last 6 to 7 years that we are genuinely doing programs, largely because of these models like SDG, and outcome-oriented CSR, and the fact that it has to be sustainable program. Otherwise, I think many of us as big groups have only felt happy that the communities look up to us for
increasingly
and I think that's where I like the change. I see the change. I like more models where if you exit a community in 3 years, or in the time frame that you have set your goals for, that's your real win. Your win is not to keep staying there for 50 years. And I come from Tata's, and I say this, I'm sorry, with a lot of candidates. So I used to say this when I was there as well, as a part of the community. So, we should exit by making them independent. I think that is a real ask of CSR in this country.
Actually, entitlement is not a sustainable attitude at all.
Yes.
It's not a sustainable attitude at all. I agree with you on that. And that brings me back to the topic of accountability. And so this time I go back to Hele and give you a little break, Shalini, until such time that I revert to you. So Hele, I have got here one very interesting question. And it is being said that ESG indices and funds are the new mantra. How can the stock exchange regulator bring more transparency to the ESG claims for the retail investors? because the retail investors may not be very aware of it. And unless they invest, of course, we need to get everybody involved at the grassroots level in this journey of, running through the SDG.
Exactly. And let me just start by saying, just to the conversation about CSR, etc. I believe that is about how we make our money more than how we spend our money. And I think that is one of the things that I've seen so many places, that if we use a lot of efforts of making money, but we pollute, we have all of the things that we don't like, and then afterwards we say, oh, now we made a lot of money, let's go out and pay back. Isn't that kind of like stupid? If you think about it, instead of making your money in a way where you're actually doing good at the same time. So that goes in terms of the stock exchanges. It's fascinating for me, as you said, that I've been on this for 30 years. And one of the things, of course, what are we doing from an asset managers? And I remember when people say like, well, we never get any questions from asset managers. We never get any questions from others. Now we have the sustainable stock exchange initiatives. Now we have, NASDAQ that was bold, I would say, to go out, and if some will say no, that was just, of course they should go out and talk about diversity. But you're starting to see stock exchanges step up and saying, this is not about having as low as bar as possible to be on this stock exchange. This is actually about having a higher bar, because that means that all of us, all of the asset managers who also want to ensure that we invest, because it's not only about how you make your money, it's also about how you invest your money.
Right.
That we actually have places where we can say, okay, there's leads, there's kind of like a bar. So you're seeing at the moment, I mean, it's very interesting to see. You have stock exchange in Hong Kong, you have Singapore, you have South Africa, you have many stock exchanges at the moment that are kind of like starting to also say, how do we ensure that we also are part of the development, in terms of those that are the issuers. One of the thing, and I don't know if that's your next question, but clearly at the moment we have a big debate in terms of all of the ratings and rankings that we are seeing, and if you go in and look at them and say, okay, I want to do ESG or sustainability in investment, one of the things I'm saying is like, please look at what's the purpose of those ratings and rankings at the same, so you don't just say, oh, great, they have ESG or sustainability or climate or whatever in front of them, tick mark, let's go and read. I know we're living in a society where we love to have the 30 characters that we can put in our Twitter or something like that. But this is like reading financial reports. Make sure you understand what it is before you put your money into it. In the same way as make sure you understand before you go in and say, I would like to have a job or buy goods and services. I mean, I put a little bit of efforts on ourselves. Again, this is not about how we spend. This is how we make, but clearly how we spend make other companies say, what do we want to do? And gives also in terms of the stock exchanges. Sorry, I think I went the whole way around on that.
No, but I think that was very, very useful and very valuable. What happens is that many other sub-questions get answered in the bargain, which is, I think, a very good idea. There are a lot of students out here also, and as we say that we have to catch them young, especially on an agenda which is as noble and as powerful as sustainable goals. So I think by all means, we are very happy with that round and long answer. It serves us just fine. So I'll go back to Shalini before I come to one last question for both of you. So Shalini, there is a question out here for you. Again from Shailesh Bhai, he is asking you, rural sustainable agriculture can take the shape of hydroponics and aeroponics and cellular agriculture to raise rural incomes dramatically. Is this feasible through FPOS?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I just want to give an example of hydroponics that when I was in Tata Power, we actually tried it in Mundra, which is in Gujarat, and largely because of the water shortage. And this is about 4 years ago, and it was done through an FPO model. So it is very possible, because if you see today, then the issue was that apart from corporates, there were no customers. But today, when you see hydroponics, it's become almost a very important integral part of a lot of construction, which is new construction, which is happening, or even terrace gardening, in urban areas. So there is now, a model where the FPOs can easily link and do this with basically the point, which is a little critical point, which we also experienced then, was proximity to the urban, location. Because this, as a concept, if you're not producing, what we were using it for was the grass, what you call as chara in Hindi. We were using it for basically feed for cattle in that particular area. Mundra has lots and lots of cow. So for us, there was a reason to grow that as hydroponics. Whereas if there's a commercial reason, then proximity to marketplace to sell or to have interaction for an FPO becomes a challenge, and therefore there has to be a little bit of a facilitation there, which I think is now really not that difficult at all.
Okay. And so can women entrepreneurs fire up a new farm to fork distribution channel?
Oh, absolutely. So, I am a great believer of a multi-model, earning for women. And what I mean by that is, let me give an example. I think Usha talked about solar microgrids. Okay.
Yes.
Now, we've done this with Rockefeller Foundation in Tata Power 3 years ago, where we tied up with Rockefeller, about 3.5 years ago. In fact, I rolled it out in a few villages in UP and Bihar, Bahraich and Gonda, some of the areas that you've heard, the district which is largely a farming district and has good water. Now, what happens is, when you have a solar microgrid kind of a model, you can and there is a woman entrepreneur. She can definitely do hydroponics, because she's either selling. She has electricity. She has water because of electricity. She can do these multiple things. So this one, unfortunately, the whole model of micro entrepreneur is finally an outcome. You want to make a lakpati out of a woman entrepreneur, that makes sense. Then the income drives what all she can do. So the mistake that we end up making in India is, is that we look at the means and not the end.
Yeah.
If you start looking at the end, then exotic organic farming, what stops them from doing that and selling the produce, apart from these bigger things, which now there is a very clear marketplace, but multiple things will help them create that consistent income. They can do dhaga, they can stitch if they want to stitch, or somebody in the family can still do the stitching, which is garmenting and stitching, which is what most rural women know how to do it. Especially, I'm a great believer in widows in villages doing this.
Yes.
Because you see, they have no other source of income apart from the widow scheme that you connect them with.
So the need is there, and
the need is there.
There comes the commitment,
and the commitment is there. They'll drive it. You see, you have to give it. So when you look at these few models which are emerging, models of hydroponics or local farming, which they are interested in, things which they understand easily, solar microgrid, where they just sell electricity to few of the other village people and just get the money out of it. I think all of that together, with a outcome kind of a model, a woman will do better than a man. Because man is more interested in rural areas and spending money. They're not interested in earning money.
Yeah.
Woman, whether it's the land from which they get the money. Why do you think Tata's did what they did? They have done this in every land acquisition. We don't hand out money because we know that within a month, they'll drink themselves to either death or they'll exhaust the money. So that's why these kind of models are worked out, because these are unfortunately the local realities in India. So a man is only used to spending money in rural area, and a woman is working hard, breaking her back. So if you give her few options of votary, of, depending on whichever area of doing multiple things, I've worked on these models. It's very, very feasible and very doable.
Actually, I'm sorry, Shailesh, you were saying something?
No, I said this is well said. I mean, I've seen it personally. There is the model village in India that I visited had every home owned by the woman because she was supposed to be responsible. And the husband was kept out of it because otherwise he would drink it away. And
Shalini, one question.
Yes.
I grew up in the center of MP, where the biggest business used to be rolling BDs, which is almost entirely done by women.
Women, yes.
Right. And then my mom came from Andhra, where most of the paddy, the real hard work was done
by women.
Paddy transplantation was done by women. What happens to all these women who are rolling BDs, and there are thousands and thousands of them, when tobacco becomes, shall I say, non-PC? Is there some transition happening for so many women employed in BD rolling into something else? I don't know. I'm just asking because
Yeah. So see, that is why, frankly, outcome model is important. I talked about that, right?
I agree.
You cannot marry them to one profession. In fact, many of these professions are also seasonal. You see, we face this in certain areas. So I have largely worked in the geographies which I have experience of. Unfortunately, MP was the only place that I didn't, but I have largely worked in Jharkhand and Jharkhand, Bihar, UP, then this Gujarat, the whole belt of Mundra, etc. There, what we've seen is that one solution does not work, and thank God for it. Orissa, okay, because that makes you think differently as a the way to. I'll tell you, even for these BD women, the way to do this, in my view, I have a 3-step model that I always recommend, and this is self-experienced, is first of all, connect all women to the schemes. One thing which Modi's done very well is he will give you're entitled to a free gas, okay? You are entitled to BMA, to a health insurance. You're entitled to if you're a widow, there is a scheme for widows. So the very first step when you enter any community, my biggest recommendation is to first of all connect them to some of these schemes so that there is some money flowing in. And you should do the same with the BD Walas and others also. There's an excellent organization, Hak Darshak, that I worked in with Tatas for scalability, and they do it through apps. So definitely that's one thing that you must do to ensure that there is this education, some kind of scholarship, etc. also which comes with this. And that sort of makes them a little bit more comfortable from the basics point of view. The second part is give them multiple options. So in our family, she can go back and stitch, get her a free machine. You can actually get a free sewing machine if you're trained. She can do multiple. Goatry is one thing which the entire family actually takes care. And that area is important to understand, as to what is the nuance of what is driving income there. So even as a BD roller, a lot of this connecting to the schemes, looking at alternatives, making sure that the end result is a monthly healthy income. It's not about what she's doing.
I'll just say one more thing and then I'll shut up.
Yeah, we are running against time now.
Yeah,
Rahul.
so just one, in Libya, in southern Libya, over the last 4-5 years, we have trained up a few girls here in Cambridge, and they started a website, an app, because it's a rural tribal community, women specialize in certain dishes. So it ended up as in, women could order special dishes. I mean, like this one makes biryani very well, and that one makes something else very well. And there was an interconnection of housewives cooking. And it released so much energy in very traditional Muslim women. Because you were playing to their strengths. She
Right.
could cook this thing, bazin, very well, for example. So, and when you play to the strengths, it works very well, is what I realized. However traditional, however
Absolutely.
supposedly suppressed.
Absolutely. I think the whole, in fact, Mr. Haribhakti was there in Ambuja's, in one of the ACC's and Ambuja's, session of CSR where we talked about papad and achar. It was one of
Yes,
the,
absolutely.
that whole industry is actually run by, and of course, Ella Ben did a great job in bringing that industry to the fore. But if you see, most of the CSR programs where there is additional income comes from what they are most comfortable doing.
Absolutely.
So
Playing to
stitching,
their strength.
achar making, papad making, in these areas that I'm talking about, they are anyway there. But there the challenge is branding and selling it to the extent possible. And therefore,
And an
they need
aggregation model using technology that really works.
packaging and technology. So yes, I mean, if somebody puts their mind to it and want to take help of other partners who are doing it well, there's enough collaboration that can happen. Like, Tata Power collaborated with the Tata Chemicals on a soap making small scale unit for Tata Power, women, because we didn't know what to do about soap making. But chemicals have been doing for ages, you see. So it's the will which drives results.
Actually, we are basically looking at a sustained and ethical creation of wealth by unlocking value, whether it is out of money, whether it is out of capabilities, or whether it is out of time. So long as we play on that model, I think everybody can be integrated in making sure that we have sustainable solutions. So since we are now running against the time, I have just one last simple question in 2 words. Hele, what would be your 2 tips for the boards to push the SDG agenda? And for you, Shalini, what would be your 2 tips for the educators and management students to, get involved in the SDG agenda? 2 tips each, please.
Should I start?
Yeah, all yours.
All yours.
Get trained. Make sure that you provide the oversight of the outcome. And then I did find 3 SDGs here. Peace. Make sure you focus on that. Make sure you focus on gender equality. And I think that is going to bring us good jobs and economic growth. So make sure that you actually provide both the insight, the foresight, and the oversight of all of these outcomes.
Chaya, one last question.
That's fantastic, Rahul. Now I think we will send it to them in writing. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
cool. Running against the time now. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so sorry. Shalini, over to you, please, because
I only have one tip. Chaya, I only have one tip, and that tip is that green economy is going to be one of the biggest opportunities for youth and for many of the upcoming generations. The way to shape this economy, instead of greenwashing and blue washing and all that is in your hands. So do it well, do it responsibly, and you're doing it for yourself actually, and for the future generations. So I hope that in our journey, in my own journey of 18 years, Heli's journey, Mr. Haribhakti's journey, we've done our bit, and that's why we are here. So it's your turn. So the baton, we are handing it over to you. Do well and do it responsibly.
Fabulous.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So my apologies to you, Rahul, but I will have your question answered from whoever you wish to. Yeah, I'm so sorry. There are many more questions actually. The topic is such, the panelists are, so very well informed that the questions are continuously pouring. I think we will have to take care of those questions through either sending those questions on email to our panelists, or maybe another, Shailesh bhai, the next part of the conference we might have to host in a while where we could try to answer their other questions. All I have to say here is that, yes, I think collaboration, innovation, integrity, commitment, these are the values, and just being just, whether it is energy transfer, whether it is money transfer, whether it is about creating opportunities, being just and fair and be together with each other is, I think, the solution that has come out of this, and that brings me to two beautiful Sanskrit adages where we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as far as we all feel that this whole world is one single family. I think it is not very difficult to achieve this SDG journey, and where we wish everyone well when we say Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, let everybody be happy, let everybody be healthy, let nobody be hurt. As long as we believe in that, I don't think any challenge is big enough challenge to overcome. So I would like to thank and acknowledge many past presidents, Mr. Anand Singhania, Mr. Nitin Bhagwat, Mr. Anil Kamath, Mr. Mahendra Chauhan, Mr. R. Ramakrishnan. And if I'm missing out any name, then it is because I'm human and not because I intend to. And I also wish to thank Shailesh bhai and Kavita and Rahul for readily agreeing for this anchorship. Okay, only a very confident man can do that. I know that. And I thought I got it just right with you. And my thanks to Hele, Shalini, and Usha, although she has left, I think we'll convey it to her. I want to leave you with just one thought, that there are far better things ahead than any we leave behind, by C.S. Lewis. Rahul, you may please invite Shailesh bhai to wrap up now.
Shailesh bhai, I don't know you, but I have read about your CV and I am bowled over. That in one lifetime you can do so much. It's amazing. That actually is my shortest thing which I can say. I will then read out your achievements, which I could.
No, please don't.
Yeah, which I could. But
please don't.
When they say a man who has worn many hats in the corporate world, seriously, what you've done is, I mean, it's awe-inspiring. So I really don't even know how to introduce you. I read it and I read it again. And I was telling Chaya yesterday, how do I introduce this man? You've done so much in so many areas, and in public sector, private sector, policy, teaching. You've covered it all, Shailesh bhai. What more should I say? Anybody who wants to read his CV is free to do that. But I can only say you led an awesome life and you have done so much, and you greatly inspired me, even though I'm, on the other side of the bell curve as far as age goes. So thank you. Chaya, I could read this out, but it's
no.
so wide and
Please
so
don't.
vast.
So embarrassing. And I mean,
no, it's not embarrassing. It's something to be hugely proud of.
We are all very proud of, and we are very proud of it.
No, I know. I didn't know him, so I am proud of him. I'm sure you all are. That's why he's there. But only I'm saying is, and all of you, Shalini yourself, I mean, absolutely brilliant. And Hele, impressed. And Chaya and Kavita, thank you so much. Over to you, Shailesh bhai.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was so touching. But I'm going to make my wrap up shorter than your introduction by just putting together from this extraordinary panel that I heard, and I had the privilege of going through or listening to every one of you so carefully. So I'm going to put out for all of us to debate the standard model of ESG. So just as there is a theory of everything, my standard model of ESG is that we have 4 forces which are operating on our space. And they're all the forces that we've talked about: collaboration, innovation, technology, bringing people together. most importantly, all these forces are being exercised by 4 sets of people: investors and bankers from all over the world, youngsters who will never work in a company which does not have a soul. It's being exercised by everyone who cares for the planet. So the planet is a big force. It's crying out, as Hele said. Hele talked about it in a very different way, but for me, it is just crying out, leave me to be what I must be. And it's crying out for our children and grandchildren to actually enjoy a better life. And then there are the fields, which are the E, S, and G. And underpinning the fields are the 17 SDGs. But the Higgs boson, which actually brings all of this together and actually recognizes material, are 4 things that all of us can get engaged in. The first one is an Amazon of sustainability. So just imagine that everything you do and buy is sustainable. So you put together a carved out Amazon of sustainability. In terms of the outcomes that Shalini so eloquently talked about, why can't we think of a Netflix of outcomes? And why not a continuous set of TEDx talks to communicate? Again, something that all of you talked about. But most important, from Hele's point of view, is to create an ERP for ESG. So we can comply with all our standards, make sure the frameworks are right, make sure there's no greenwashing, blue washing, SDG washing, nothing. And bring out the outcome of a better planet for all of us to enjoy. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. And thanks to all of you for the wonderful way this was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kavita ji, over to you, perhaps, to close the conclave. Somebody needs to unmute her.
Yeah, you are muted, Kavita. You continue to be muted.
You have to exercise your option when it is available.
How can Secretariat mute the President?
It's a metaphor for life.
There you go.
Yes. Thank you. That was a treat for last 3 hours that we had. I think all the discussion that had happened is giving lot of directions to all of us in order to think and act. Mother Earth is calling us, and we need to stand up to the calling that we are getting. I know what we are using needs to be kept for the future generations, and that sustained actions that we will take today are going to make this world better for living. Thank you all. Thank you, Shailesh Bhai, for your support, mentoring, directions, and whatever you have helped us in creating this, right from conceptualization to getting collaborators as our own Bajaj Electricals. Rahul Bhai, for taking this to anchor the all-women conclave, which is going to be a challenge, we thought, but it has gone very smooth. I can't thank enough Chaya Madam, whatever she has done, right from conceptualizing with Shailesh Bhai, helping in all aspects of operationalization, creating the panel for discussion, and many things that she has done. My thanks are due to all our guest speakers who are there from all over the world. For Hele especially, because she had to get up too early than usual time because of the time gap that we have. Hele, thank you so much for getting up for Bombay Management Association, which is miles away, but you did it for us. Thank you so much. Shalini, you have really impressed me. And you have given a lot of directions to the young students who are attending this conclave. I think a small step taken by many is going to change and going to make a big difference to the world that we are living in. Though Usha madam is not here, but I think her being here only was a great achievement for all of us. She coming from UNDP and from the horse's mouth, we are looking at how globally the associations are looking at. I think no words to thank all these panelists that we had. My colleagues in EC and also the secretariat, which is once again all women, all girls secretariat that we have since last 2.5 years. I think they have worked a lot. And this is the day, not only for the conclave, but also on International Women's Day. I think I want to pat their back, say well done, and you can do it much more better than this, what we have. We are blessed to have you all at BMA Secretariat. Girls, cheers for all of you. And I'm thankful to all of you for all the support that you give. All the participants in this webinar, 3 hours is not a short duration. And we know that now we work, people are not working from home, they are joining their offices. But constantly we had almost over 100 participants for all these 3 hours. Thank you all for being with us. We will keep on giving you exciting programs in our Wednesday Wisdom webinar and Friday Fundamentals. This being a very special day, International Women's Day, we thought that we can deviate from our regular Wednesdays and Fridays to celebrate the sustainability and the International Women's Day. Thank you all for joining. The next coming up on this Friday, on 11th of March, is none other than Miss Meera Borwankar, who is going to share her leadership lessons being in police. Extended Women's Day celebration with Meera Borwankar. Do join us at our regular time at 6 o'clock. And I will not forget to thank our sponsors, Shri Shekhar Bajaj, for extending his support through our own Shailesh Bhai. Shailesh Bhai, thank you very much. And we thank Bajaj Electricals also for being part of this conclave. And we are proud of our association. Thank you very much. Hope to see you all on Friday at 6 o'clock to listen to Ms. Meera Borwankar about the lessons that she learned in her police service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and all the best. Good night, everybody.
Good.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Hele. Bye-bye, Shalini.
Thank you all so much for all your leadership.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you so much.
Kavita.
Thank you. You were
Thank
brilliant.
you. Thank you all.